Hey there, all you wackadoodles. It's time for yet another installment of my show, Artist Advice, where I give you some pertinent advice if you want to be an artist, as the name would imply. And as always, I got public domain tracks in the background of the video, and these videos are unedited. I don't edit these, generally, so no cuts. Just straightforward advice, shooting from the hip, walking around here at night, walking around the mean streets of Denver, and a little speed limit checker right there. Ooh, someone's going 33. Anyway, today's installment of Artist Advice is about perfectionism, which is a pretty common problem I see with artists, and this applies to both musicians, visual artists, really any field of art, is that a lot of people get bogged down in the details. A lot of people feel like they have to make the frickin' Sistine Chapel ceiling right off the bat. And I think this is a problematic view of what art should be. I think it holds up a lot of artists. I see it all the time. I see this like actively ruin the careers of artists who could otherwise like really have some serious potential. And I think it's what divides successful artists from unsuccessful artists. Ultimately, this one factor, whether you strive for perfectionism or you don't, that determines where you'll end up in terms of artistic success, recognition, people caring about you, and what you've got going on. An adage that I espouse quite often, and every time I say this, every time I mention this even, people look at me like I'm crazy. But the adage I ascribe to is called quantity over quality, which in effect mandates that you shouldn't care about making a perfect thing, right? You should just make shit, just like constantly, at a rapid fire pace, because the more you do that, the more often you do it, the better you'll get at it, and the more likely you are to create something amazing. Like, every time you create something, the odds just rise and build and build and build. You know, it gets more statistically probable that you'll make something that people actually enjoy. The odds grow with every new installment in your discography or your bibliography or whatever, that you'll tap into something. With me, that success came with Hypnagogic Archive. Hypnagogic Archive was not my first ARG, far from it. I had made a couple before it. I made one called The Door, didn't get a very good reception. I made one called Mystic Cement, didn't get a very good reception. Now again, there are external factors at play here. I got a lot of shit back before Hypnagogic Archive took off. A lot of people hated me. A lot of people shit on me for my autism, obviously, and because I'm queer, but you know. So, I did get a lot of shit back then, but that's kind of besides the point. The point is, if you make enough of any given medium, whether it's ARGs, comics, music, whatever, eventually you'll find something that people like. So that's what I mean by quantity over quality. I mean that you should not focus on making a perfect thing, you should just focus on making a mediocre, passable thing. And once you do that, quality will follow. Like, I have right now 5 unreleased albums that I plan on releasing over the course of the next couple of years, sporadically, every 4 or 3 months, right? I'll drop another one of these albums. And having like 200, 500 songs in your discography is a weird thing, right? Most people don't have 500 songs in their discography, but what I tend to think is I'm going to take advantage of the capacity of my computer's huge storage space, and the fact that I can store so many freaking songs on it, and I'm going to make a shit ton of music because that's what I love doing. And the same goes for my word processor. Same goes for comics. If I can make a lot of something, I'd rather make a lot of something than a little of it. And even if that lot of something is of poor quality, then a potential little tiny scrappy selection of something, that's what separates real artists from fake artists, is that if you're a real artist, like if you legitimately have this burning passion inside you to make shit, you actually can't avoid making a lot of shit. And not all of it's going to be good, but it will be passable. If you have a modicum of talent, it'll at least be passable. It'll at least be sort of quality, right? So a good comparison would be Twilight Zone versus Black Mirror, right? I shit on Black Mirror a lot because Black Mirror is a terrible fucking example of science fiction, but it's also a terrible example of TV writing. It's a great example of why nobody cares about television anymore, even though, you know, Netflix is like fucked up the boundary between TV and movies, which is, in the first place, what made TV worth watching, is that it wasn't the movies, that there was a boundary, a separation between the small screen and the large screen, if you would. So, Black Mirror, in effect, promotes all of its episodes just like fucking extravagantly, right? So they'll have, like, you know, Bandersnatch, and they'll be like, Bandersnatch is coming. They spend $50 million fucking dollars on posters and t-shirts and shit. All this extravagant shit to promote one episode of something. USS Callister is coming. Hey, Jonah's Awful is coming. So it's called Jonah's Awful. God, I fucking forget. I hate Black Mirror so fucking much. It's the bane of my existence as an actual sci-fi writer, and not just like a stuffy fucking, you know, this guy like fucking Charlie Brooker. What a fucking loser. Anyway. Dang, I narrowly avoided death there. I'm in a Twilight Zone episode myself right now. So, Twilight Zone is a good example of how a TV show should ideally be written. There's tons of episodes of classic Twilight Zone, the original series, and that's because back in those days, they didn't spend $1 million trillion bucks on marketing for every single episode. They didn't need to, because the work spoke for itself, because it was just so fucking good. So there wouldn't be like, oh, you know, this week on Twilight Zone we've got shadow play. You want to watch shadow play? And they wouldn't like build giant fucking cardboard cutouts of Adam Grant, because the work spoke for itself. So you don't need to promote something like a really good Twilight Zone episode, like 100 Yards Over the Rim or whatever, because it stands on its own merit. And that's what separates a really timeless, extremely... Oh, there's a mouse there. Or something. Shit. Anyway. That's what separates a really timeless, beloved show like Twilight Zone that values real writing, and a shitty cash grab like Black Mirror that just hops on to trends and focuses on shitty modern stuff and is boring and lame and extremely repetitive and will be forgotten in like 10 years once it inevitably ends. There's no way it can just keep going at this rate. But generally, it saves its resources. How it's been able to last for 10 fucking years, which is way too long. And back in the actual days of TV, it would have been canceled by now. If it had to abide by an actual schedule, because back when you had to, really put some limitations and guidelines on your writers and have them come up with a new story every week, they weren't all going to be winners. But if you actually put pressure on them to create, then some of them would be good. I'd say like 90% of Twilight Zone episodes are good just because they actually force their writers to create, and they weren't like, you can take a year and we'll have a giant trillion gazillion marketing budget and every episode is basically a movie now, because it's not like, it's a bad way to create art. You don't create good art if you focus and try to make everything about every single installment perfect. That's not how any artistic medium should be. Even movies need human error. Even movies need flaws. It's stuff like the Stormtrooper bumping his helmet in original Star Wars that makes it more charming than The Rise of Skywalker, where everything is perfect and ironed out by CGI, you know. It's imperfection that makes art worth consuming at the end of the day, is kind of my point here. So, yeah, Black Mirror versus Twilight Zone is a good example of quantity versus quality. And anytime I bring that up to people, they're like, oh, dang, you know, that's crazy, Nick. You really ascribe to that? I take a year to make everything. And it's like, you don't need to take a year to make everything. Just make it and put it out there. And if you don't like it, you can change it later, but just make it in its purest form, because the more time you spend making something, the less of the original idea you had, the impetus you had, the less of that there will be. Like movies that go through development hell, for instance, they change so much during their production that the finished product is virtually unrecognizable, right? So like, you can't even tell what the movie was going to be, but the end result is like this malformed mutant that's not even good, just because like the studio system fucked it over for so long and prolonged it for such a massive amount of time. Development hell is horrible. It's horrible for filmmaking, and it's horrible for like everyone. But ideally, movies and any form of art should be made quickly, because if you do that, then you'll have the best possible capturing of that lightning in a bottle idea. And I guess that's really what I mean to say, is that you can't wait to make art. When inspiration strikes you, you gotta make it. In fact, the entire reason I'm making this video right now is just because I was thinking about this exact subject, and I was like, I gotta grab the camera and walk around Denver at night and talk about this, because there's literally no other option, because I just have to, and I gotta get this out there in the hopes that it resonates with someone. Even if it doesn't resonate with you, it resonates with someone. And that's the point. And you know, you're going to have some bad episodes and some bad comics and some bad screenplays. You're going to have some substandard material. But if you build up your portfolio, if you make shit just like constantly, and you don't worry about quality, you don't worry about reception, you're going to eventually make something worthwhile. And that's why I get so involved in Denver art and stuff. It's just I want to encourage this climate to keep growing. I want to encourage it to keep making shit, because a lot of artists lose their motivation. So what I have to do is I have to boost their egos. I have to compliment them, even if I don't particularly like something that someone's made. I won't be an ass about it. I'll be like, well, you made something. You made something, and something is better than nothing. So just keep making something and get better. And some people never do get better. Some people just make crap forever. But you should generally encourage artistic output, because it's healthy for an artistic ecosystem. And a lot of artists just get hung up on this minutia, these tiny details that don't mean anything. They're too neurotic. It's anal retention, and it's bad for art. I hear from a lot of bands who say, oh, well, we can't get studio time, and we need a professional recording for that. Meanwhile, their live songs sound better than their studio recording, and they could just record a live album and sell that, and then buy studio time with the money they make off their live album. But they don't consider that maybe people would be willing to consume live music. They don't consider all their options. And also, they don't consider that maybe certain genres of music should sound less clean than others, less polished. For instance, all my music is recorded on a crappy $30 microphone that cuts out if you so much as jostle it a little. And I've recorded like 500 fucking songs on this thing, and I can just use the computer to reduce the noise and put a little reverb on there, and there you go. It's a perfectly serviceable album, you know? It's an entire ass album of music that I've made, all because I wasn't preoccupied and focused on the tiny little insignificant details that ultimately nobody even notices or cares about, and that imperfection makes my stuff a lot more charming, a lot more unique, a lot more, you know, standing out from the grain. So, at the end of the day, I think perfectionism can actually kill art, and a lot of artists care way too much about looking perfect, but you're not going to do that because you're human. And when you're human, you make errors, you make mistakes, you make crap every once in a while, but you should. That's to be expected. And yeah, I think a lot of people get too hung up on the little things, and that's something to avoid. Definitely, that's a pretty common blunder I see from budding artists. Is, oh, we gotta have this perfect equipment, we gotta have this perfect easel, or I'm not gonna be able to paint right. And it's like, paint on a fucking piece of bark, paint on some fucking driftwood. It'll be worth it. People will notice, people will care, people will appreciate your talent. If you have talent and you manifest it in interesting ways, people notice and people care. And just kind of a hopeful little message to leave you out on there. But like, yeah, it's very important in today's climate especially to make a lot of shit. And not all, you know, don't just like half-ass it, but at the same time, don't worry about, you know, oh, people might not like everything. For as long as an album or whatever has existed, nobody likes all of it. There's just a couple hits. And at the very least, I'm going to be a one-hit wonder because there's one of my songs someone's going to take notice of and go, hey, this sounds fucking good, you know? So, just keep making shit, and eventually you'll stumble upon gold. So, yeah. Just like, don't give up just because you don't have like the perfect everything, you know? Life is unpredictable. Make something out of it. Anyway, that's it for this little episode of Artist Advice here, and my advice to Charlie Brooker is just quit the fucking industry already, you fucking hack. Like, how do fucking people take you seriously? We went from fucking Harlan Ellison to Charlie Brooker. No wonder this generation's brains is rotted, huh? They're turning into fucking soup over here. Anyway, that's it. Like and subscribe and smash and all that jazz. I'll catch you in the next one. Denver's quickening my pace and my thirst for blood. Sorry.